All right, in 10 minutes, I'm going to show you the stuff you should look at when you're looking at a massive preset. We're going to start with initialize patch. Not all that interesting. Initialize patch is a great way to hear how everything works. For instance, the voicing section, frequently underlooked section, will control how many voices in this one oscillator that are being rendered in the massive engine. So at 1, super thin and gross. At 2, a little bit more interesting, we hear some harmonics. At 3, starting to get interesting, something clashing. If we go all the way up to something like 8, we have a giant sound. We can make it monophonic in this menu, and actually voicing is a great tab because it contains unisono spread parameters which affect the way that the unisono is rendered in massive, so we can pan these voices to different places. Really wide, inverted, well actually this way's inverted. Inverted just seems to sound better. In mono it sounds like this. As we move it out, you're going to hear it get wider. We could put a modulator on this to make a really interesting sound. In massive, all of your envelopes and modulators are available up here, and to assign them, you just drag them to an open box and go up or back, however you want the modulation to happen. So what this is going to do is it's going to swing the pan positioning back and forth with this low frequency oscillator. I'll speed up the rate so you can hear it converge, and then we can hear it move slowly. This is the shape of the curve. Hear that divot? We can move where that divot happens in the phasing really easily. But this is just one type of modulation source. Green lets you change the source, so we can have an LFO, or performer, or a stepper. They work sort of how you might expect them to work. It's moving it in this shape. Stepper, maybe easier to see. Randomize. Moves it in this shape, and you can change all these. Next place to look to is the filters. Filters have a really interesting way of shaping and sculpting sounds of massive and are responsible for a lot of the sort of leady tones that you'll find in presets. Depending on the type of filter used, the cutoff and bandwidth parameter, or sorry, the cutoff and resonance parameters are going to be your go-tos. So put on a bandpass filter here, we'll really hear this strong. When we find a cool cutting motion like that, we just draw it right in with modulation. Go to envelope 3, where actually at this point I should mention envelope 4. Envelope 4 is a special type of envelope because it's assigned to the amp mod here. What that means is that this defines how our amplitude is for the entire sound. So the reason this sound hits and holds is because this envelope is being executed when I'm launching it. If I take the sustain right down on this, we're going to hear it pop off like a stab. If I shorten the release time on that, and the decay time, I can make it into a cool stab. Hey, let's put some delay on that. And make it a weird time. As we move our sustain back up, the note will sustain, and the delay doesn't sound so good. Pads, of course, have a longer attack. And that's how they come in. Massive's pretty good at laying things out in a simple way. A lot of people go to the oscillator tabs to shape sound, and there's a lot happening in the oscillator tab. One of the most important things that I wish someone told me a long time ago was that the pitch modulation are these little boxes below each of the oscillators. So if we turn all the oscillators on, we're going to have a wicked big sound. Turn off the bandpass filter. Shorten the attack. So if we take one of these and assign them, say, hey, to that stepper we just made, and take this oscillator and have it so that it's playing at a constant pace so that it is not abiding by this amplitude envelope. Going to routing. If we bypass 2, we can put another envelope onto the bypass mod. Jack the volume right up, and now 2 will sustain while the others come and go. Of course, it's executing this funky random pattern here. In this way, we can have 2 different types of envelopes firing at the same time, a sort of whoosh and something that's sustained. Don't ignore amplitude, don't ignore the amplitude envelope and the bypass mod, because you can create two simultaneously firing sounds inside of one massive. That's massive. One other thing you might like to look at, and I'll go to a random bass preset here. Let's find something in Massive Factory. Ooh, I like Acid Stage right away. Let's talk about how to read a patch. When you hear a preset patch that has a lot of movement, your first place to look is the pitch. Well, depends how you define movement. If you hear a lot of modulated movement, look at the filters and look at what types of envelopes and modulators are affecting those filters. And if you hear a lot of melodic or oscillating modulation, look at the pitch envelope. This is really going to be a secret here, because 8 reveals that this is being modulated by the stepper by 24 semitones. Which means we can speed this pattern up by changing the ratio of this. Or make it a weird time signature. Or, because it's mapped to number 8, bring it down altogether. What we just did is effectively doing it. So I mentioned the filters are also an important place to look. Listen to what happens when we move the filters on this patch. Huh, not as profound as I wanted it to be. Let's just change the filter type to a band reject filter. Now we hear that articulation. One interesting concept that's really easy to implement in Massive is to have one envelope doing the exact opposite thing of another envelope. So for instance, if we have our amp modulation envelope going like this and sustaining and then dropping off, it'd be super cool to have our filter doing that exact same thing as well. But have it doing it in the reverse. But you're not hearing any articulation. There's one more step to this that makes it all relevant, and this is why there are 2 notches for every little box of Massive. There is a sidechain notch, but the second notch is to add a second modulating parameter to that. So if we take another, say, low-frequency oscillator, something going really fast and moving just a little bit, what we get is something that sounds a little bit different in the filter position every single place you hit it, which is a really cool way. Once you have some sort of setup like this, you can feel free to move this knob inside your DAW with great results. It's just so much fatter than when we were moving it before, because it's got 2 different modulation things. One's that's the same as the volume, the same as our amplitude modulation, and another that's moving this thing really fast. So as we move it, we're getting different wavetable positions every time. Go back to our voicing, and if we crank this up, using the tricks we already learned, maybe some self-referential modulation, we're on our way to a really cool sound. That's our own. All right, that's enough to get you started. Now go have fun.